Hey everybody, Tom here, and welcome to this video where I want to talk about teaching games. Really quickly, before I do that, hopefully quickly, I want to do a little background about why the heck I'm doing this video. So, about 6 or 7 years ago, I first got the idea that I wanted to make a YouTube channel. But I know that it's a very crowded market, and so I wanted to do something new and unique. Kind of brainstormed with some family and some friends about what do I want to do, and we talked about having a unique voice and how even though you could be doing the same thing, you could have your unique voice and people might like that and whatever. And that's great. But I also really wanted to bring something unique to the channel or to YouTube. And so I was just barely starting teaching and teaching math in middle school. And I had the thought about my life in the gaming world. And I wondered how many people there were like me. So for example, in my family, in my circle, I'm the one that owns all of the games. I'm the one that teaches the games. I'm the one that recommends the games. I'm the one that reads the rule books and watches the YouTube videos to learn the games and all of that stuff. And so I'm the one left to teach all of the games. And really early on in my board game career, I'm sure we all went through this, I recognized in myself that I was a really crappy teacher. And the consequence of being a crappy teacher is that a lot of times you could drive people away from a game, or even worse, I noticed sometimes I was driving people away from the hobby. And that sucked. And so kind of these things were happening. I was thinking about starting a YouTube channel. And again, very long ago, I kind of had the thought to myself, I actually had this thought while I was watching a Rodney Smith Watch It Played video. I was like, what if I had a Watch It Taught video or a How to Teach videos series where basically I take games and I teach people tips and tricks on how to teach that specific game. It was something that I, over the years, have kind of prided myself on as I've played with family and friends. I recognize in myself that I think I'm pretty good at teaching games to a live audience. Whether I do that well or not on camera is a different story, but it's something that I really work hard on after being terrible at it for so long. And so I had this thought, I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be great. I'm going to do a how to teach series of videos on YouTube. I even emailed Tom Vassell about it. I was like, hey, do you think there's a market for this? And he wrote back very generously. He said, you know, I'd be interested in seeing a video like this. And I was like, cool, I'm going to make it. And so I wrote a whole bunch of scripts and I started plotting out how I was going to do it. And I just couldn't get anything to click together for me. Not only that, I started my first year of teaching, so this stuff was happening in the summer before I started teaching, and then I started teaching, and I was like, this is never going to happen. So I've had this idea that I want to do a how to teach series for people who are like me, who are kind of in charge of teaching the different games. And so with that, what I'm going to do in this video is a general top 10 list. These are the things that I look for or try to do when I'm teaching any game in general. These are kind of general rules. And then what I'm going to do after this is I'm going to try to start a series where I get game specific. And so like the first set of videos I'm going to release with this is going to be Crystal Clans. I'm still going to do my normal setup and I'm going to do my normal gameplay video, but I also want to do tips on how to teach Crystal Clans and so on. And so of course I'm going to be curious about your guys' feedback. Just a heads up that you might not agree with the things that I say in my list. Everybody has a different teaching style. Everyone has a different learning style. Play groups are different. I recognize that. But for the most part, I've had positive feedback about my ability to teach people games. And so I wanted to share things with you that I keep in mind as I teach games. So without any further ado, is that how you say that? Well, let's go to teaching tip number 1. My first tip for teaching any game is you have to have the right game with the right audience. I mentioned briefly that very early on in my entry into the hobby, what would happen is I would just get so excited to have a specific game. I saw a video about it, I learned the rules, I just wanted to play it so badly, and any group that I could get together, I was like, boom, we're playing this game. And a lot of times that was not the right group for the right game, and it just like crashed and burned. So my first recommendation is that you have to be aware of your audience. Who is the group that you're playing with, and how does it match with the game or games that you want to play? If those don't match up very well, I think you're going to have a negative experience, which could turn people off of a very good game, and it could turn people out of the hobby, which is something that happened for me with some of my family and some of my friends. So, along with being audience aware, there are two things that I'm thinking of that you need to kind of keep in mind. There's the obvious. There is, you want to make sure that the group is, excited about the theme, for sure. But something else that you need to make sure that you're aware of is the skill level. Is your group prepared to learn the game that you're about to teach? And this is why this is tip number one. It's such a simple tip, but a lot of people don't think about it. I think that we gamers get so excited about the new hotness that we just, any group that will play this game with us that's willing to sit down, we're like, yeah, let's do it. And they might not be ready for it. So we've got to make sure that we pick a game that matches the group's skill level. And along those lines, as you're teaching the group, be aware of their vocabulary level. Don't use words from other games or like different mechanisms and things like that if that group is not prepared for it. So you kind of want to be aware of who your audience is, what games have they played in the past, what vocabulary are they going to know. Do they know the word drafting? Do they know the words like area control? Do they know the word worker placement? Are they aware of these things? If they're not aware of them, don't use them, or at least use them in a context where you can bring them along with you for the ride. I'm moving my hands a lot, but you can't see them. I'm learning. This is my first video. Tip number 2 has to do with setting up the game. Now, I think that there are several of us who, like, we know how to set up a game, and while everyone is watching TV or finishing dinner, we go onto the game table and we get the whole thing set up, and then we bring people into the game after that. And there are a lot of situations where that might work, and that might be the best thing. It will depend on your group, it will depend on the game and how long it takes to set up. But my tip has to do with the fact that there's a lot of stuff that can happen to bring people into a game during setup. So by allowing people to help you set up, there's a couple of things that will happen. They're going to be able to see the artwork, and they're going to get excited about the artwork. They might get excited about the theme. They're going to ooh and ah what they're seeing. They're touching these components. I mean, that's why we play board games, is so we can touch the components of the game. But the other thing that they're going to do is they're going to start to see different icons or text or things on the cards or the board or things like that that might pique their interest. They might start saying, what does this icon mean, or what does that icon mean? And they're going to be at least aware of those things. So while you're talking about things during the game explanation, they will have had some exposure to that. And what I like about all of this, and especially the artwork thing, is you're really going to, while they're helping you set up, you're going to expose them to this world. Because that's the fun about board games, is you kind of go into this world and you're like, hey, we're going to go fight zombies, or we're going to go into space, and you really want them to get engaged. And especially these days where the art is so good, give them a chance to actually hold the pictures and to see things and to get excited about what you're about to do. But even more importantly than that, something that I've noticed when I turn on, again, I'm not trash talking. I love Rado's channel. I love all of these gameplay channels. But one reason why I do a setup video in my channel is that, like, when I'm watching a gameplay video and everything is set up and I don't know anything about that game, a lot of times I'm wondering how many of these elements are randomized, how many of them are set, like what things go into setting up this game. And for me, as a learner, that's really important. So as you're allowing people to set up a card, like if you're letting them set up the board or you're letting them put tokens on, they can actually see, oh, this is a double-sided token. There's something on one side and then there's a back side. And they don't know the game, so they don't know, like, they're not cheating or anything, but you just say, hey, why don't you put these tokens, make sure they're all face down. Then they know stuff. They know, oh, there is something on the other side of this token. These tokens are totally randomized. I'm going to probably be going around and collecting these tokens. So don't shy away from setting up the video. Like, let that be, or not the video, the game. Let that be a part of the learning experience where appropriate. Now, if there is a game that's going to take you an hour to set up, get that mostly set up before you bring people to the table, because you want the setup to be a positive experience for sure. Tip number 3 that I have might be controversial. I know that there are two different kinds of people in terms of learning. There are some gamers, probably your more advanced gamers, that want every single rule up front. They want you to explain everything and then you'll start playing. And if you didn't explain a rule, they're going to get really mad at you. I know that there are those people. I get it. But I have found that more people than not, at least in my circles, want the explanation to be quick, and they want to get their hands dirty, and they don't mind learning as you go. Again, that's kind of how I formatted my playthrough videos. I don't teach you every single rule before I start playing. I teach you enough to get you started, and then we start playing. So my tip number 3 is keep your rules explanation quick and keep it as hands-on as possible. This is like even how I teach math, honestly. I mean, I could sit up there and do a whole 40-minute lesson about systems of equations. Or I could give them situations where I have like small questions and let them experiment with that. And then I give them another question and let them experiment with that. And for me, teaching math and board games, I have found that that's a little bit better. So along with keeping like things quick and hands-on, here are some advice for that. First of all, smile and stay excited. If you're like, ooh, as you're teaching the game, they're not going to be excited about it. You have to remember to smile. You're putting on a performance. You're selling this game to people. Essentially, that's how I feel about it. I try to get as happy and excited as I can beforehand. So smile and stay excited through the explanation. If you start to drag, they're going to feel that drag with you. Along these lines too, you want to celebrate signs that people are understanding what you're saying. And so if you hear people asking questions, think to yourself, is that a question that says that they weren't listening, or is that a question that says that they are listening and now they're ready for the next thing? And I know it is so easy to get annoyed and to say, hold your questions till the end. And maybe that's your style, and that is totally fine. For me, I welcome questions. And sometimes I have to say, do you know what? I am going to get to that in just a second, but I'm glad that you asked that question because it shows that you know what's going on. So celebrate these moments when you can tell that people are understanding what you're saying. And don't get snippy. If you're starting to snap at people, you're going to start pulling them out of the experience. So if someone is asking you a question that's in the future, don't be like, oh, I'm not going to answer that. Just be like, yeah, I'm going to get to that. Keep smiling, stay excited. Or if they ask you a question and you literally just said the sentence that says that, that's okay. If they didn't hear it, they didn't hear it. It doesn't matter. Like if I have a math student ask me a question, I just finished explaining it. I mean, of course, sometimes they were on their cell phone, right? But still, I need them to learn that concept. And when you're playing a game, they need to know that rule. So don't be snippy, keep smiling, repeat stuff. Even if it's going to be the first time that they're hearing it, it's good that other people are hearing it a second and a third time. And it's going to get them to root those rules deeper inside of themselves. And finally, one thing that's really important to me is know the tone of the game you're playing, and throughout the game, maintain that tone. If you're pulling out Cosmic Encounter and you're not willing to stab someone in the back, or you're not willing to trash talk, or you're not willing to like really get into the negotiations, that game's not going to go well. People are looking to you to set the tone for the game. So if it's a negotiation game, you've probably got to be the first person to start doing some hard negotiating. If it's an auction game, it might be detrimental to your gameplay, but you've got to get in there and you have to start like doing some serious auctioning. So keep that in mind, that it is going to be part of your job as the teacher to set the tone of how this game is supposed to play. Next, this is the biggest chunk of the video, is going to be rules explanations. So when it comes to explaining the rules to someone, you have got to be prepared. It doesn't mean that you have to be perfect, but it does mean that you need to have read the rule book. You might not get it all right. I don't get stuff all right on my channel, and I don't get it all right when I teach people. That's okay. But at least I can fake it till I make it. So you have to be prepared. Read the rule book, watch a video explaining the rules, and probably watch a gameplay video. The reason why I say that, and I know that's a lot of time, but this is part of preparation. Because if you read the rule book and then watch a video, sometimes you're gonna catch the person making a mistake, or sometimes you're gonna catch a mistake in your understanding. And then especially that's going to happen as you watch the gameplay videos. That's why I haven't been overly hard on myself. I make a lot of mistakes in my playthroughs. But the reason why that is okay for me is because if people know the rules, they're going to be able to catch those mistakes. And we really do learn from mistakes. But I'm just saying that you have to be as prepared as possible. Do not bring the rule book. I mean, have the rule book there, but don't bring the rule book and open it up and start reading the rules. In fact, don't read even a sentence out of the rule book unless it's in the middle of the game and someone's like, well, I think you got this wrong. And then you open it up and you read the rule, but don't read paragraphs. Don't read pages. That's crazy. In fact, my next point is, I think that the order that most rule books lay things out is crazy. I tried all day to make a cool like graphic to show you guys what I'm about to say. I couldn't do it. I was a failure. But essentially, let me use my hands on this part of the camera. Essentially, rule books say that in this game, you're going to have a turn. And on your turn, you're going to do these actions. And these actions are going to do these things. And these things are eventually going to get you points. And then eventually, this is how you're going to win. It's a very linear thing. For me, it doesn't really make sense with this shape, but I always think of rules as circular. So if you imagine this list of things that the rule book is telling you, what I do is I always try to think of this circularly. I start at the bottom, I work my way up, and then I repeat everything coming back down. So let me be more specific. When I teach any game, the first thing that comes out of my mouth is, we're playing a game about space. The goal of the game is blah. Tell the person how they're going to have victory. People love to win. That's why they're playing the game, right? So tell them this is how you win. So, for example, well, I'll do it more when I do my crystal cleanse video. You would say, for example, the first person to get 4 crystals is the winner. Boom. Talk about how to win. The next thing is talk about the step that happens right before that. So, again, crystal cleanse, because I just recorded this video. With crystal cleanse, you have to have 4 crystals to win. To get a crystal, you need to have people on 2 of these 3 spaces to win. So you can kind of see how I'm starting at the bottom of the rule book and I'm wrapping myself upward. You say how you win. What's the step that comes right before that victory? Like, how exactly are you going to get these points? Do you need to trade in these cards to get these points? Do you need to cover 5 areas on the map to get those points? People are probably going to be lost, but they're going to remember the first thing you said, which is, this is how you win the game. So you said, this is how you win the game. This is how you're going to do that. This is how you're going to do that. And here are the choices you're going to make. And then what you do is you repeat everything. I'm a math teacher and a game teacher. Repeating is good. In fact, we usually make fun of me and my family because I say things over and over and over. But you say, hey, here are the 4 actions. And remember, we just talked about this. Once you choose these things, or once you choose this thing, that's going to let you do this, which is then going to let you do this, which is going to get you the points, which is going to be how you win. So again, doesn't kind of make sense, but I always think of it as circular. You start at the bottom and work your way up, and then you're going to work downward. So that is my trick to explaining rules. Start at the back of the rule book, go to the front, then go from the front to the back without reading it. Finally, well, not finally, but the next thing is emphasize over and over. This is a learning game. Some people come into every game intent on winning. And if you don't tell them every single rule, then you are the worst teacher, and this is your fault that I'm not winning. I always call it the learning game. In fact, a little behind the scenes, I actually really wanted my channel initially to be called The Learning Game, where we as a group together on YouTube are going to practice learning this game. I still might change it to that. I'm a little wishy-washy on that right now, but for now I'm sticking with Tom Teaches. But yeah, emphasize that this is a learning experience, that we won't count this no matter what happens. You're not a good person or a bad person. We're just going to learn the game together. Okay, so that's part of explaining the rules. Just be upfront about that. This is a learning game. And along those same lines, be very upfront. Let people know, this is my style, right? I say, I am not going to teach you every single rule right now. They will just get confusing, and I want to get us playing as soon as possible. Let them know that you're going to trickle down information as time goes on, but that you're going to tell them everything they need to know to get started, right? The victory, how do you get to the victory, and what are your main actions? And you'll get to the other things as soon as it's important. This is going to sound crazy coming from me. As much as possible, avoid long blocks of talking. So like, I would listen to podcasts and sometimes, like on the Secret Cabal, they would say, yeah, this guy took 45 minutes to teach the game. And I'm just sitting there thinking, you couldn't have started, like you couldn't get one round out of the way and then talk more about it. Try to not have huge blocks of teaching like I'm doing right now. Try to break up your talking points with actions that they can actually take. So to me, games are so much more fun when you can get in and get playing. Even if you suck the first couple of rounds, it doesn't matter, you're learning the game. Finally, I know that Tom Vassell says this all the time. Never hand out a player aid during the rules explanation. I don't like that because for me, if I'm learning a game, I need to see that I'm such a visual person. And his point, I understand it. It really depends on your audience probably and the player guide or the player aid that you're looking at. But like for me, if somebody is just telling me a bunch of stuff and I don't see anything, I will forget it instantly. But if somebody's explaining something and I have that player aid in front of me and I'm like, okay, I can track what you're saying. And even though I don't understand what you're saying, I know exactly where to look to get help. So player aids, it really depends on who you are. Again, it's always surprising to me that Tom Vassell is so like super against player aids during explanations. And for me, I'm very pro player aids during explanations. I think that they do a great job of showing iconography and all of that stuff. So that was the biggest section, rules explanations. Again, bottom to top. This is a learning experience. Be open and be aware and keep smiling, right? My fifth tip is that the player order for this learning game does matter. If you put yourself first or last, can have an impact on how well you're teaching this game. So anytime I go into a game, I always ask myself, is this a game where I should go first, or is this a game where I could go last? And here's kind of a general difference between the two in my mind. But of course, every game is somewhere in the middle and you have to just make a choice. For me, I go first anytime the game is bigger or if a turn has several steps to them. So like a game like Tikal, where you have 10 action points to spend. I'll go first on that game and I'm going to say, hey, there's 10 action points and here's what I'm going to do on my turn, and I'm counting it out and I'm repeating stuff. And so like bigger games or games with a lot of steps on a person's turn, go first so that people can see an example and use that as a moment to teach, okay? This could be part of your rules explanation to say, all right, so for example, I'm going to take these actions and here's why I'm doing that, and I'm hoping that this will give me points at the end. So bigger games with longer turns, you go first. If it's a shorter game or a smaller game, gateway games, there's a good chance that you could go last. So like some examples I'm thinking of is Splendor, right? Splendor, you do one of three things and you can go really fast. And so if you sit back and let the person to your left go first and you just say, hey, these are your options that you could do right here. As long as those turns are quick, awesome. What I like about this is a lot of times with those turns, the choice at the beginning is very simple, it's very clear. And so like for example with Splendor, you're always going to start by drawing chips, right? So say, hey, pick one of these cards that you want, and you're just going to pick some of the chips off of the table that match these colors that you need. And that is something so easy that you can have everybody go around and pick their chips, and then when it's your turn, you're going to pick chips too, and you're going to say, okay, now something that we're going to want to think about now is you might be picking chips again, or maybe you're going to do this other thing. And so with these smaller, shorter games, usually I will go last because it's really quick and simple. Some other examples are Camel Up or Crystal Clans is another example where I think that if the first turn is an obvious turn, you could go last with those turns. And that way people don't feel like, oh, well, you're going first because you're going to take the best card. They get to go first, okay? So that's tip number 5. The turn order can matter. And so be careful with what order you're going to take your turns in. Tip number 6 is remembering that this is a learning game. You do not need to win this game. You do not even have to have a great strategy. But what I do think you should do for tip number 6 is to verbalize everything you're thinking. Verbalize your process. Anytime it's your turn, explain all of your options and then explain why are you considering some of these options and why are you not considering others. So like I just talk my way through every one of my thought processes when I'm playing. And the players don't do it, but my impression is that they appreciate that I'm talking about my strategy. I might even say, hey, I have this long-term strategy. I'm going to try to get over to this side of the map. And so that's why I'm doing this stuff over here. And yeah, I'm giving away my strategy and I don't care because this is supposed to be fun. And if people feel like you're willing to help them, I think that they're going to be more into being excited about playing and winning this game. And so I'll always start by doing this a ton in those first several rounds, and then I slowly start to pull back. So you start off heavy, and by the end of the game, you shouldn't have to be explaining everything. Hopefully by halfway through the game, you're not explaining your strategy anymore. So start off heavy, and then pull back, and I think that's going to bring people into saying, oh, this is a friendly teacher who wants us to learn the game, who wants us to have fun. He's not really in it to win it, for example. Along those same lines is tip number 7. Be willing to help every person at the table. There should be like no hidden cards from you when it comes to that table. If somebody is looking at their hand like this, then say, hey, let me come help you. And you stand up and you walk around the table. Maybe you want to bring your cards to show them your cards, but you're going to say, hey, look at these cards right here. I think this is probably where you want to go. So another thing that I do this a lot with math is when I can tell that they're struggling, say, well, what's your instinct? What are you thinking about doing? And sometimes when you listen, you can figure out, is this a person struggling with a rule set, or is this a person struggling with strategy? And you can kind of guide your answers after that. Maybe if they're really struggling, take that whole option, like they're going to have 5 choices on their turn, right? Take all 5 choices and narrow some of them down. Say, hey, do you know what? For you, I think your best thing is going to be to do this or this. If you do this, this is going to happen. And if you do this, this could happen. Both are good options. Why don't you just try to pick one of them and see what happens after that? So if you kind of narrow down, cut out the clutter for them, if they're really sitting there scratching their head and it looks like they're not having that much fun, helping them narrow down their choices, I think, is going to take a weight off of their shoulder. Make sure you're explaining the pros and cons, not only of your decisions, but of the decisions you're helping them with. If you see them doing something that is so obviously crazy, don't just let them do it. Say, I want you to rethink that, or point out, I can see why you're doing that move, but here's why that might hurt you in the end. Maybe this might be a better way. Do what you want, but I'm just letting you know what I'm seeing from my point of view. And finally, don't make choices for them. Let them choose which of these options that they're going to do. So I'm not going to just play everybody's game for them. Anytime somebody asks for advice, I try to give them 2 or 3 good options that I would do if I was in their shoes. So you just have to have this friendly personality while you're teaching a game where people will feel comfortable. And it's so funny. Anytime I'm teaching a person and it's their first time having a game taught from me, they're always skeptical. They're like, why is this person helping me? But at the end, they are always grateful. I'm glad that you helped me with that because I was really struggling with this thing here and there. So, and similar to how you should be explaining your thoughts a lot at the beginning, eventually back off. But sometimes you have to jump back in. It will really depend on the player. It will depend on the group and the game. But don't be a curmudgeon, as they would say on the Cabal, right? Just be helpful, be nice, be willing to participate in their learning experience. Tip number 8 is going to kind of reference something I said before, which is that there are some rules that can wait. There really are. And again, this is going to be dependent on your group. I think that there are some people that would get very upset if you don't tell them every single thing, but you don't want to make the whole group suffer for that. So that's why you're upfront about it. At the beginning, say there are going to be rules that will trickle down later. And if there comes a moment, and this happens sometimes, right? If there comes a moment where somebody's like, why didn't you tell me that rule? You should have told me that. And they are probably right. You probably should have told them that a little earlier. If that ever happens, just say, do you know what? You're right. I should have told you that rule before. I totally forgot. I apologize. Let's let you do that this time so that you can keep going with your strategy you've been working for. But from here on out, we need to make sure that we're not doing that thing. So there are rules that can wait. And if you wait a little too long to tell that rule, that's okay. Let the person do the thing, use it as a learning experience, and then say, perfect, now we know the rule. So from here on out, we can avoid this issue again. And my other thing along with this is that I actually think there's a lot of times where there are nice layers of complexity in a game, but sometimes those layers can wait. So some examples that I have for this are Blood Rage. Anytime I teach Blood Rage, I never draft the first age. I deal out their hand so we can learn the game, and we play with the hands that were dealt. We don't draft the first age because I just get so bogged down. Like, I know that people get bogged down. They're like, I don't know what to keep. So don't let them choose anything. I don't even tell them that there's drafting until the second age begins. There are mechanics that sometimes can wait. Another example of this would be Terraforming Mars. It's really a big drafting thing. Like, drafting is definitely a mechanic that if it's not Sushi Go, right? Sushi Go is just a drafting game. But if it's a part of the game, be okay saying, we're going to do this later. I'm just going to deal out the cards and we're going to play with the cards that were dealt for the first round or whatever it is. So don't be afraid that there might be mechanics that hinder the general understanding of the game. So don't be afraid to just put those off until later on in the game. And kind of along those same lines, but almost the opposite end, is that there are sometimes parts of the game that you could actually extract from the rules explanation and just do a practice of at the very beginning. And so, like, for example, in my Crystal Clans video, I think the battling is fun, but it's really complicated. Like, you want to see this played out. And so don't be afraid to pull out a chunk of the game, put it at the beginning of your rules explanation and say, hey, we're going to practice this for a second. And so, like I said, Crystal Clans is an example of that. What's another example? Rising Sun. The battle that happens in Rising Sun is extremely confusing for people. So what I usually do is I just throw some of the dudes on the map and I say, let's do a practice battle right now so that during the game, you know what's going on. And I just give them some coins and I say, why don't you just randomly put these coins on your board? We're going to reveal them and let's show how a battle actually plays out. And so don't be afraid to take out the most complicated part of a game and do it early. And so for sure, if battles are complicated, practice the battle beforehand. Another explanation or another example of this is Libertalia, or is it Mission to Mars, I think, where everybody simultaneously chooses a card and puts it down. Just say, like, especially with Libertalia, where everyone starts with the same cards, every time I teach that game, I hand out our cards. We've all got our cards, right? And I say, everyone just pick a card and put it face down. We're going to do a totally fake practice round just so I can help use this to explain the rules. So if you notice that there's something that could be using some extra explanation, extract that, do a little practice with it, and then do your full-on rules explanation. And even if they don't get it, right? Like, my explanation of the battle in Crystal Clans is not great if you have watched that video. But just by doing a practice, I've exposed you to it. And then when I come back to that later on in the video, maybe they actually have questions that make a lot of sense when they're put in context because they've been exposed to that a little bit later. So yeah, take a moment. Don't forget that you can extract stuff out and do a blind practice. Just say, I don't know, let's all try this. What if we all roll our dice right now and look at these numbers and let's talk about what could happen. So don't be afraid of the blind practices. It's just a fun thing to do. I mean, you could even do that with full-on rounds. So for example, when I play Blood Rage, I will always say, hey, we're going to do a practice age. And the first age, not only is there no drafting, I make that a complete practice. And I say that up front. I say, this is going to be a practice age. And at the end of this age, I'm going to let you guys choose if you want to continue with the setup that we have, or if you feel like we need to restart. And so I always do that, and almost always, even though things aren't going well for them, when I play Blood Rage, they say, no, let's just keep going. I want to see where this goes. And then I'm like, cool, hey, guess what? Second age is here, we're going to draft. And it just opens that up. So there are parts that you can actually physically practice as you are playing the game. Finally, I want to really encourage you. This goes back to something I said at the beginning. Have fun. Games are supposed to be a fun experience. The more fun that you have, the more likely it is that your group is going to be having fun. If you aren't having fun, there is no chance in heck that your group is going to have fun. Sure, you might have players that get frustrated. You might have players that are frustrated with your teaching, but you have to keep the smile on and you want to keep going. This is supposed to be fun. Similarly, I already mentioned this, but I just want to re-emphasize this. You have to be prepared to step out of your comfort zone, not only to teach people, but to play a role that might be contradictory to your nature. So for example, I am not a backstabber by any means. Like, I am the guy that will play clean all the time with the game, and I usually do it with like a malicious grin so that they think that I'm not playing it clean, but I usually totally am. But when it comes to games that need backstabbing, that first time, and especially because it plays in later, I really try to just get into it. I'm going to stab some people in the back. I'm going to negotiate till my hearts can like burst out. I'm going to push an auction farther than I probably should, farther than it would benefit me, just because it really plays into the game. And similarly, while you're having fun, realize that not every game is going to fit every group. Even if you prepare, even if you think this game is going to work, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work. And that's okay. It's not a reflection on you. It's not a reflection on the game. What I love and is frustrating about games is that it's all about chemistry. It's a lot like dating, which is why I'm single. But it's a lot like dating where you just need all of the pieces to kind of work together for this perfect moment. And it might not be a perfect moment, but that doesn't mean it can't be a good moment. So in closing, this was a long video. My general tips are you need to be aware of your audience. Pick the right game for the right audience. Involve people in the setup so that they can have exposure and they can start manipulating these pieces and they can kind of see where we're headed, get involved with the theme. Keep your explanation as short and hands-on as possible, which means that you might have to teach some parts in a different part of the game. Your rules explanation should always be bottom up and then or like from bottom to the top, and then from top to the bottom. Keep it circular. It's like an elevator. Well, it doesn't matter. But go from bottom to the top and then top to the bottom. And always ask yourself, what would be the best time for me to take my first turn? Should I go first or should I go last? Involve people in your thought process. Help them. Make sure that you're not being like a stickler, like you choose for yourself. No, sit with them. Look at their cards. Explain a word. Whisper. Take them to the different room if you have to. Involve them in your thought process and let them involve you in theirs. Some rules can wait. And if people think otherwise, they're just grouchy, okay? And maybe you're one watching this video who just wants all of the information up front. But even if you're given all the information up front, you are going to forget some of it, and that is okay. It is okay for your teacher to hold on to some information. It is okay for you to let go of some information. Don't be afraid to do a mini practice round. Don't be afraid to do a mini practice battle and things like that. And finally, have freaking fun. I want people to come into this hobby. I love having people in this hobby, and this hobby is here because it's supposed to be fun. So make sure that you have fun. Now, I've given you my tips. I hope that they were semi-fun to listen to. I apologize for any and all of the rambling that happened. I hope that maybe even just 1 or 2 of these tips works for you. Maybe not all 10 of them will. Obviously, we could disagree about stuff, and that is completely fine with me. But hopefully this has been helpful for you. I'm going to try to make a couple of teaching tip videos for the games that I'm playing. Maybe I'll even try them for games that I can't play. I don't know. We're just going to see. Any and all feedback that you guys have is welcome. I apologize for the weird background. I actually don't have any cool place to record. This is the best place I could find. And so you're seeing my messy house behind me. That's just the way it is, right? So in my perfect world, I would have something in the back. I don't have a perfect world, and I don't have a backdrop. So thank you guys for watching. Let me know if you have any different general teaching tips for people, or things that you've done or said or thought that are really helpful to bring people in. I would love to hear them. Leave me a comment below. My throat is totally drying up, so I'm going to end this video. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you later. Bye!